Okay, so in this video we're going to create a curve, and then we're going to use that curve as a path to extrude through. In the previous lesson we used a curve to attach a camera and animate it along that curve. You can actually use any other object to animate along the curve, but for this here one we're going to use it for extrusion purposes. Okay, so again, when you're starting off a curve I wouldn't use the perspective view. It's harder to get where you're laying out your curve. So what we're going to do is we're going to go pop into our top view. And to start it off again, we're going to go create CV curve tool. Okay, so I'm just going to make a random curve here. Press enter. It's pretty important to note also that when you're creating a curve, that you know where you've started and you know where you've ended the curve. So your curve does have an absolute start point and an absolute end point, and it's pretty important when you come into extrude. So I know over here is my starting point. So I've got a curve here. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to make a cylinder. So I'm going to try and replicate what a lead would look like if it was laid on the floor. I'm going to rotate it here. Now you can see that I'm using discrete rotate. So if I double click on my rotate tool, I've got discrete rotate. So that means when I'm rotating it, it's actually stepping about 15 degrees each time. So it means it's a lot easier for me to rotate it level to the floor. And I'm just going to move that over. Okay, so I've got that in place where the cylinder is basically facing towards the angle of the curve. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hold my right click and I'm just going to select those front faces. Okay, so all I have is those front faces, and it's pretty important that you make sure that you've only got the faces selected that you want selected. And I'm going to hold shift and I'm going to select the curve along with them. Okay, I'm going to make sure I'm in polygons mode, and I'm just going to go edit mesh, extrude, and you see what's going to happen here. It's actually extruding right to the end of my curve. If I open my attributes editor, I'm in poly extrude face. You see there's some attributes, and the reason it's just going straight there is because it's only got one division. Okay, so I could put 200 in there. You can see now that it's following the curve pretty well. I can also come over here to the attributes editor, and you can see that I can actually start curving or twisting that, or I can use the taper. So the taper makes it thinner or thicker the farther along that it is. You can actually use the taper curve here, so where it starts off at normal thickness, you can drag it down to be really thin at the very start, maybe, or just after the start, and then after a while it'll become really thick again, and then thin, and then thick, and then thin. So you can see that we're getting this curve that is going thin to thick to thin to thick to thin, and then staying thin the whole way across. Just going to exit out of those. Another great thing is my polygon tube here is actually still attached to my curve. So if I wanted to, I could come back into my curve, right click over on top of it. You might have to zoom in to get to do that, and go to control vertices. Now if I look, you can see my tube is kind of overlapping here, and that's something that we don't want. So I'm going to move my curve up, and you can see that it's actually moving this up with it. So I can make that sit just on top of it. Bring that over. So it's now lying on top of it. And I can do a lot more than that. I can come over here and actually edit my curve a lot more, and it's taken my geometry with it, and it's doing so in a natural way, which is pretty nice. So even though I've extruded through it, I can still manipulate that curve, which is going to edit my geometry as well. Once you're happy with your curve, all you have to do is select it, edit, delete by type, and delete the history. Okay, and that way the curve and the geometry are no longer attached to each other. So if you're moving your curve by or your geometry and you're getting these weird results, it's probably because they're still attached. So the last thing you should do is, once you're final with the curve, is detach those by going edit, delete by type, delete history when your geometry is selected.